Thank you, as always, for listening to Caleb vs. Self. On this episode, I get a chance to talk to John Crump, director of the Virginia GOA, investigative journalist for AMOLand.com, and on YouTube at John Crump Live and John Crump News. We talk about his work as an investigative journalist, including an in-depth article he did on Adam Lankford's study of mass shootings, his FEC complaint filed against Facebook, Kamala Harris, and some more commentary on a picture that was allegedly David Chipman. There's a whole bunch more stuff in there. Hopefully you get a chance to listen to the whole podcast. Also, check out John Crump if you're interested in Second Amendment stuff. Check him out at John Crump Live, John Crump News, and his journals, or his articles, I should say, on AMOLand.com. Hopefully you guys enjoy the episode. I've said it twice already, but I'll say it again anyway. John, thanks for hopping on. I have John Crump with me, Second Amendment rights, investigative journalist, director of the Virginia GOA. Find him at crumpy.com, AMOLand.com, as well as his YouTube channels. You got a whole bunch of stuff going on. You even have a book. But let me get started more importantly with what is it at this point that continues to drive you to writing on, reporting on, and being such a huge activist in the Second Amendment community?
Well, writing on and reporting on is the search for truth. I believe a journalist should be searching for truth. And if you read my articles and you read some of the comments, you have people on both sides, the pro-gun side saying, hey, stop selling out to the anti-gunners. Then you read the people on the anti-gun side writing that, oh, I'm a gun nut. And when I see that, that lets me know that I'm probably over the target, because the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. We live in a world of gray, even though we like to see it as black and white. So I like to give the facts. I don't put too much of my own opinion into the articles. I mean, some does seep through. I cannot deny that. If I deny that, I would be just as guilty as a lot of other people. But I let my biases be known, and I try to avoid pinning my biases into my writing as much as possible, just pinning out the facts and letting the readers decide what they take away from it.
So, and first and foremost, that's unique, I will say, right? In a lot of the stories that you talk about, you try to do your best to cite things. You do reference other materials and works that people can also check out if they're further interested in a particular story, which is really cool. But
absolutely,
I mean, for me, it sends me right down the rabbit hole, but I don't know how other people are.
Well, that's the point. The point is, I usually give my sources and I give all the information. I think there's too much articles out there and too many reporters out there that don't say where they get their facts from, and they don't say where they get their stats from. They say, here they are, believe me, and this is what they are. I believe that I should be able to say, this is where I got them from. You want to double check me? Go double check me. Because, trust but verify. Reagan used to say that. And I believe that's the way we have to look at news today on both sides, because both sides do this hyperbolic thing where they, demonize the other side, and then they twist stats and statistics to fall into line with their beliefs. And they're more of arguing their beliefs than saying, hey, here's something right here, and I don't want to tell you everything, so go find it out yourself. A lot of my articles I end with, I'm not here to make a judgment. I'm here to give the facts. It is for your job to go out there and look at all the facts and decide what the truth is.
So at the end of the day, you feel that specifically, well, any journalist really is responsible for providing the facts up front and then denoting whether or not they have an opinion on the subject, and to make it clear that, hey, here are the facts, here's potentially how I feel about it? Or do you feel like the job of a reporter is to stick strictly to the facts?
Okay, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I
Sure.
try to stick directly to the facts without giving my feelings. I will give my feelings on certain things, and that is not to say, "Hey, you need to feel the way I do." It is to say, "Hey, here's my feelings. This is what I believe." Because rereading it, it probably came out a little bit more than I would like it to. And I've tried over and over again to take it out as much as possible, but it's still in there. So I want to be upfront and honest where I'm coming from with the readers. So if there's a slant, the readers should know about it. It's very, very hard to do true, fair, and balanced reporting because your own feelings is going to seep in somehow.
Yeah, we all have a
So
natural bias, right?
yeah. So the fair way to do it is to say, here is my natural bias, and here's the article.
So one of the articles that you wrote that I want to specifically point to that you actually I feel did a pretty good job about it is on AmmoLand. It's Adam Lankford's study of mass shootings called into question, where obviously you're making the claim there that no one can get the data that is purported in that specific study that a lot of people apparently are citing. And then you go one step further even to point to the crimeresearch.org numbers to corroborate some
Yeah.
level of data in that story.
Yeah. In that story, I went back and forth with Adam Lankford trying to get his sources. Because if you read his study, it's not a peer review study and it doesn't give where he gets his data from. And I went back and forth with them saying, I want to know where you get this data from. Where's this data? Because I looked at the FBI statistics. I looked everywhere and couldn't find this anywhere. In fact, I found numbers that contradicted his numbers. And Adam Lankford refused to tell me where he got it from, basically telling me that I could go try to find it myself. And that's not something that you want to do. If you ask me where I got my numbers from, bam, there it is. And that was kind of disheartening to me because even people on the opposite side of the issue um that I will respect you if you say, "Oh, here is my data," instead of saying, "I'm not going to tell you where I got this information from," and no peer review study out there and no statistic out there backs up what I'm saying. You just have to believe me. And I don't think that is true
Yeah, well,
necessarily.
especially in that specific environment. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he is in the academic fields. It should be a peer-reviewed study. And you even looked at specifically, well, if it's not peer-reviewed, then who paid for the study? Because, I mean, if it's a publicly funded study, then academically it should go through some type of review, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. If it's a publicly funded study, I believe that it should go through some type of academic review. I'm a big fan of peer review studies. I'm a huge fan of peer review studies because to me, it's getting to the truth of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And when a professor refuses to submit his publicly funded studies to be peer reviewed, that kind of calls it into question a little bit. Not saying that the information is there in there is wrong or anything. It's just I can't find it, and he won't tell me where all this information comes, what studies are cited, what other studies are cited. I should say, what type of research did they do? It's a bunch of statistics thrown in there, and there's no backup. I mean, I could write a study tonight saying that lip gloss is radioactive. Doesn't mean it's radioactive, but I'm going to be called on that. And there is a lot of people in positions of power in academia or whatnot, in the media too, who state stuff that's never called into question. And I've called out our own side on this, the pro gun side, saying you got to list this or this is wrong. For example, the picture going around of David Chipman, of the purported picture of David Chipman at Waco, that wasn't David Chipman. And I called out a lot of people for saying that that was David Chipman, and I did a lot of research. I tracked down where it came from. I tracked down that it was a member of the FBI sniper team, and also that it wasn't David Chipman. Um, and I got attacked a little bit because of that, because people were like, "Why are you pointing out this isn't David Chipman?" And my answer is because it's not David Chipman. When you fight against something that you feel is unjust, and a lot of stuff that David Chipman does, let's be honest, almost all the stuff David Chipman believes, I'm against. But you got to attack him with truth. There's enough there on Chipman to attack him on his actual beliefs and everything, than to attack him on a picture. I even tracked down where that picture came from. The Daily Mail reported that to be David Chipman. They got it from a lawsuit that one of the Waco survivors filed against the federal government. And they pulled all the pictures and they were looking through it and they said, "Hey, that looks like David Chipman." And
And that was it,
and
huh?
they ran it of David Chipman, and everyone called him David Chipman. And I looked at it, I was like, it looks like him, but I'm not going to put out an article or use it in any of my articles or mention it in my articles until I can definitely figure out if it is him or if it's not.
And that's interesting because you put that was on John Crump News. You did a video on that, also asking for people to help you out a little bit and see if they could corroborate whether or not that was Chipman. And just to give a little background to the story, Chipman is, if I'm not mistaken, somebody who is up for a federal nominated position here, if not already, correct?
Yeah, the vote's actually tomorrow, which is Thursday, June 17th. I'm not sure when this will release, but he is the nominee for head of the ATF, which is very interesting considering that he is an anti-gun lobbyist. He actually works for Giffords, and he helped Mike Bloomberg set up Mayors Against the Illegal Guns, which became Everytown. Not only that, he has some really radical beliefs that are like really outside the mainstream of a lot of people. For example, magazines. He wants to regulate magazines. Magazines, if you don't know, is the thing that holds the rounds, the ammunition. He wants to regulate those as machine guns, which there's no way you can read the regulation of what a machine gun is and think it's a magazine.
Sure. Especially given, how magazines actually operate and all the different capacities that you could potentially have with a given magazine, and the fact that you could just print magazines. So I don't know how you're going to regulate them if they can just be, 3D printed at this point. But that's neither here nor there. I guess my point specifically with talking about this is, in my next question is that given the fact that obviously Chipman is on one side of this argument, I would assume, right? I think it's a safe assumption, you're on the other side of said argument.
Absolutely. I'm very open about that.
But with all that being said, you're still going and saying, look, guys, there are better ways to go about defeating or, overcoming whatever obstacle Chipman presents to you than making up the fact that he was at Waco through this picture.
Well, he was at Waco.
Oh, was he? Okay.
He was not in that picture.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I was able to confirm he was at Waco, but that wasn't him in the picture. So yeah, there's a lot of better ways to do it.
So why would people in your community specifically give you such a hard time about a picture then?
Because like in any community, whether it's the gun community or any community, when there's something that's so perfect that says, "Hey, look, this guy is evil, and look, he's posing with dead bodies or whatnot." That was the thing that people were saying. That was so perfect and so to the point that they could point to it and be like, "Hey, look, I told you he was evil." Instead of building a case of why. I don't think he's evil, by the way, but I'm just saying that was the thing. But instead of building a case of why he should not be the ATF head, it's a lot easier when the answer is right there instead of having to actually work for the answers. And a lot of people come into this with a preconceived notion of what they want to believe. And I am for the fact that what you believe should be challenged, because it would either make your belief stronger because, hey, I went through a challenge and it made my belief stronger, or it might make you think about your beliefs and think, hey, maybe I'm wrong. In this case, I believe that this was such a perfect example of who David Chipman is, that everyone wanted to believe that that was a picture of him, because it made the case against him so much easier to prove by that one picture.
That's fascinating. Just the fact that you've got somebody, or I should say, I have somebody here that is coming from the perspective of challenging one's preconceived notions, so that either you will come out the other side feeling that your idea, belief, etc., is that strong, or you may find some other facts or other information that may slightly change your stance on something, etc., etc. Where, at least in this whole process, with being such an avid Second Amendment supporter, did you feel most challenged in your belief with the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment?
Well, I've challenged myself a lot with the belief by going up against other people and looking at their statistics. I've never wavered in my support of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. I believe that it's fundamentally a human right to be able to defend yourself and to choose what you defend yourself with. I've also read a lot of Federalist Papers, read a lot of the writings of Madison and Jefferson, and even Washington to some extent, on gun ownership. And so I think I know what the founding fathers were saying. And I'm also a big fan of Locke and stuff like that, which he doesn't deal with firearms exactly, but some of the stuff that he does say about like individualism and stuff like that can be applied directly to that. And I think Madison, when he was writing the Second Amendment, took a lot of inspiration from Locke. And I know Jefferson did too. And if you even read the Federalist Papers or even the writings of Jefferson, you can see what they were talking about with the Second Amendment. And there's no gray area in there. To say that the Second Amendment is about a standing army is just false. And if you read Madison or the Federalist Papers, which I encourage everyone to read the Federalist Papers because it talks more about just guns. It talks about a lot of the stuff in the Constitution. And like my thoughts on legalization of drugs have changed a lot. I'm not a drug user, never used drugs, but
Sure.
my thoughts on the legalization of drugs over years have changed by reading what the founding fathers talked about, what people like John Locke has talked about, Thomas Paine talked about. And it seems kind of weird to apply that to something like drugs, but then again, you can take what they're talking about other stuff and apply it to whatever. And yeah, it kind of helps me look at that. And also, like for drugs example, I've looked at other places that decriminalize them, like Sweden and stuff like that, and I look at and see how successful they've been compared to a prohibition on drugs.
Sure.
And so I look at the there, it's a couple different things. It's not like a zero sum game, of course, but I look at the prospective outcome, and then I also look at the detriments to freedom. And with guns, one of the things I looked at a lot of studies, like for the assault weapons ban. I looked at a lot of studies, including one that was done under the Obama Justice Department, and it basically said that the assault weapons ban from that went from 1994 into the early 2000s had almost zero effect on gun deaths or anything else. So it's being pushed again, and that leads me to the question of why is it being pushed again if we have, you know, like 10 years of studies showing that it's not really effective. So getting back to your question, my belief in the Second Amendment has never really wavered. I've been challenged, but I've always been able to rise to that challenge and look at it and come out usually stronger in my beliefs because I allowed myself to actually say, maybe I'm wrong about this. Let's have a conversation. Tell me why you believe the things you do. Tell me where your sources are. And taking that in and listening and going back and doing the research. Because I think a lot of people get into this thing where they want to defend their position. So they debate. And debates are great and everything. But when you debate, you're not really exchanging ideas. It's a an adversarial approach to it
Yeah, yeah,
instead
yeah.
of an exchange of ideas. And I would much rather have an exchange of ideas than go into some adversarial approach. I mean, I have been in there and I have taken the adversarial approach, but those are usually to people who are come at me from an adversarial approach, and there's other people that are on the fence that are there, and you have to defend your position in that case. But I would much rather have a conversation and an exchange of ideas, and let me hear what you believe and why you believe that, and taking that in and then checking my own beliefs against that and seeing, well, maybe something I don't that would change my opinion.
Yeah.
Because people who are stuck with their opinions and they don't change, I think that's dangerous, and I think we see that a lot today out there.
Yeah, you're 100% right, I feel like, about that. I feel like the art of conversation has been lost. We can't just have a friendly exchange of ideas, even if we disagree, because it turns into this adversarial conversation of me against you or your tribe against my tribe. And, Lord help me if I lose this, because if I lose this, I lose a sense of my identity. And I feel like a lot of people have tied their identity to a specific set of, whether it be beliefs or structures. I also feel like that's very true in any community, but just as much in the 2A community, that people tie their complete identities to having this right or fighting for this right. Do you ever have to have those type of tougher conversations with folks in your own community, kind of pulling them maybe away from a fringe or two? Because, and the reason why I put it in that context is because the 2A community is a rather large community here in America. And naturally, if you have such a large community, that's going to intersect with other communities, right? In this case, if I'm just being stereotypical, I imagine there are folks that might be Proud Boys or might be, some other type of fringe or fringy type of belief system that also intersect with Second Amendment rights. Do you have those conversations? Do you run into people like that? How does that happen?
Well, believe it or not, yes,
Sure.
there are Proud Boys and other people in the 2A community that are like that. So I'm not going to deny that. But the 2A community is a lot bigger and a lot more open than what people think it is.
Mhm.
One of my friends, Chris Chang, is on the cover of Recoil magazine coming up for this month. And Chris Chang is an Asian man who happens to be gay. And he's on the cover of Recoil. And it's Pride Month, so that's why they chose him. But he's also a great guy for one thing, and he's very, very, very pro 2A. And we also have other people out there. One of my friends, Adele, she is big into gun rights, and she's transgender, for example. And then I have one of my really close friends, Devin, is African American, and I do a lot of stuff. Well, like one of the sponsorships I have with the podcast is African American gun ownership. So I sponsor one of those.
Mhm.
So the 2A community's a lot bigger. And if you haven't experienced the 2A community, go out there and range, because there's this stereotypical view that the 2A community is middle-aged white men. And I'm a middle-aged white guy, but
Sure.
there is a lot of people don't know this, but Eric Pratt, who basically is like the head of GOA, the face of GOA, his mother is from South America. Um, And our director of outreach is not a middle-aged white man. She's not white. She's not middle-aged. And she's not a man.
Sure,
So
but for Chang,
they're
for example, there was public pushback on that.
yeah, there was public pushback on that, and I will agree that there was public pushback. Most of the pushback was due to people thinking that Recoil was pandering um, to a woke crowd. So that's why there was pushback against that. There wasn't a lot. I mean, there was some pushback because he was a homosexual, but most of the pushback was them thinking that Recoil was pushing back to a woke crowd, and was trying to pander, trying to get points with the left, which I don't think that's what they were doing. But with like companies like Coke doing their training and whatever that was about, and some other companies like that, they were afraid that Recoil was falling down the same rabbit hole. At the
Gotcha.
same time, I think Recoil did that, put him on the cover to get a reaction. I will say that.
Well, I mean, that is part of their job, right? To get eyes on papers or eyes on magazines.
Yeah, and it worked. I'm not shaming him for it, but
yeah. And to be fair, right, in defense of you did tweet out and you did, put out your support for him. So certainly not trying to dig at you or anything.
Yeah,
but it's
somebody was asking.
Yeah,
somebody was asking me, why are you going all woke? Why are you supporting? Why are you supporting this guy because he's gay? And my response was, I'm not supporting him because he's gay. I'm supporting him because he's my friend.
So those conversations do come up, and you address them just like you do any other thing, right?
Yeah, I don't hide. I don't try to play nice guy or, try to play cutesy with, I'm not going to tell you how I feel.
Sure. Well, given the space that you're in and your writings, I don't think you have the luxury to do that even. But
no,
you feel comfortable
I don't have the
doing it.
I don't have the luxury, and I don't have the will. I would never ever pander to anyone to get anything.
Yeah, I mean,
I will always say my piece.
Yeah, you seem staunch in your beliefs, and what I like the most so far about reading your work and listening to a lot of stuff you're talking about is, again, like you said before, you're not going to tribalize things, if you will. This isn't a you against me. This is I want to have a conversation. I feel very strongly about my beliefs because I've put them through the ringer so many times and it's come out the other end. You've refined that process so you feel comfortable voicing your opinion and doing it in such a way that isn't adversarial in a lot of your work. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, tribalism is something that I think that we fall into a lot in this country, and not only in this country, but in this world. And I think we need to move away from tribalism. You can't have 100% aligning views with almost anyone else.
Right.
Just not going to happen. But people pretend like they do.
It's a very human thing, though, right? To get into a tribe, to be a part of a group. That's a hard thing for us to get away from, I feel like. Not to say that it wouldn't be good, because I agree. I think that it's necessary, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, it is hard to do for me. I've never really been a joiner, I should say.
Sure.
So it's not as hard for me to do as a lot of other people. I don't know if it's just the way my mind works or whatnot. I have a real issue with authority.
Okay. Well, that's
joining groups isn't usually working out too well for me.
That's a very American thing, though, and I feel like that's also interwoven into our identity with freedom and specifically with owning and bearing arms. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, culturally speaking, we do have a very strong link to weapons. And I feel like a lot of that is because, I mean, starting from the inception of our country, having a weapon has meant you have the ability to be on the side of your own personal freedom, whether it be in 1776, whether it be, moving out westward, whatever the case may be. That's been a strong tie into our culture. Do you feel like that's something that still remains today, or do you feel like the 2A community has shifted to kind of a different perspective on that?
No, I definitely do think it remains strong today. And for example, even people who like a year ago, 2 years ago, I saw like I used to work at Facebook, and I had a coworker who was like really, really anti-gun. Was like, no one needs a gun, no one needs a
Sure.
gun. And then I saw him, I guess, July of 2020, for the first time in like a couple years, walking into a range with a rifle case. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, what do you have in there? He's like, oh, I got my AR and my Glock. I was like, I thought you were against guns. He was like, yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I think I was wrong. And I'm also a member of GOA now. I thought that was awesome. But it shows that, it is American to own guns, and it is it is a very American thing. And it's not about the gun. It's about the will of being independent, the feeling of being independent. It's about independence. It's bred into our nature as an American. We are taught that independence is something that is great. And I've talked to people from other countries, like one of my really close friends is from India, and he's like, we don't have that over there.
Right.
And this is something that he thinks is awesome over here, is how everything is about independence over here, and self-determination and stuff like that. Where he's from, it's not. You're a member of a family name, and whatever that family name is, what caste you're in, and that's where you stay. And that's why he wants to become an American, is because that feeling of independence. I have another friend who is Russian. His name is Slava. I call him my crazy Russian friend. He actually came over during the Cold War. He defected to the United States, and he has that strong feeling of independence. And that's one of the things that he likes about this country, is the self-determination and the self-reliance that he didn't get back in the former Soviet Union. And the one is not an American, but working on becoming American. The other one's American citizen now, and they hold American values more than most people born in this country. And I think it's because they saw what's on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't had to go through either A, the opposite of having this type of freedom, or B, never having to actually defend or be put in harm's way to do, um, to set up people to have that type of freedom. I'm sure that factors in heavily, being from a country that doesn't have that type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like the former Soviet Union. I also know a guy that escaped from North Korea. And he talks about the nepotism over there and stuff like that, and how much control they had. And I asked him, it's like, how did you get like unbrainwashed? And his answer was, I got an illegal radio, was able to receive broadcast. And then I realized everything I was told was a lie. And he was a fisherman, and
Right.
got away.
Right. Do you meet people like that through your time as being a journalist, or how do you meet people like that? Is that through GOA, through your local gun community, or?
It's a couple different ways. It's one, for me being a journalist, I seek out these people because I do a lot of interviews and stuff like that. And even just for my own thing, I want to know what their experiences were and what they have been through, because the human condition is something that really fascinates me. And the human stories, everybody has their own story, and every story is fascinating. Some people think that their lives is boring, but if you look at some of the stuff you've been through, it's like, yeah, maybe our lives aren't as boring as what we think they are. you always hear someone say, well, that life should be a movie. Well, anyone's life could be a movie because there's some really crazy stuff that happens in everyone's lives. And also the area that I live in. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, which just happens to have a lot of people like that that now work for our federal government that come from other countries and stuff like that as well. And it's a very high tech area, so anyone who works in tech usually comes through here
Like,
as well.
I mean,
So it's
in your
a bunch of
capacity at
different things.
Facebook, right? What did you do at Facebook specifically? If
I was
if I can ask.
Yeah, you can ask. I was an engineer. I did network engineering, data center design, network security, also some coding as well. For people think Facebook is just located in Menlo Park out in California, but Facebook is located everywhere. We have offices in Facebook, it still says we sometimes, but Facebook has offices in North Carolina, DC, Washington, Iowa,
I mean, they have
all over the place.
massive data centers, I assume, in so many different locations.
Yeah, massive data centers, massive different companies. They own tons and tons of companies, just a bunch of different things everywhere. So I got to meet a lot of people. And that's one of the things that kind of showed me the way Facebook was going. And I kind of had to get out because
can you elaborate on that? Like, what exactly did you feel was coming down the pipeline?
Looking at the internal boards and looking at the people making the decisions at Facebook, it was a very small majority of them making the most noise and the decisions. And most of those people were from the Menlo Park, Silicon Valley area. One of the things that was disturbing to me is that a lot of them looked down on other people as like the uneducated masses. They had this like kind of better than thou attitude. And also they viewed a lot of people that weren't extreme left as being extreme right, even the people in the middle. And I think part of the reason is that those people lived in the Silicon Valley area, which is extremely left leaning. So the center, being in the center in Silicon Valley, is way to the left at almost everywhere else in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they just got in that mind space that, hey, the whole country is like this. So I'm a little bit left, but I'm not that far left, even though that most of the country, they are that far left. And there was, which disturbed me, but not as much as other things. Like Facebook was always about like, we're going to let people go right up to the limit without stopping them. We're not going to tell them what to believe or what not. And I started seeing stuff like, hey, well, we need to shut this down or we need to shut that down. And some of the stuff they were shutting down, it was just a difference of ideas and not really anything dangerous. It wasn't like shutting down dangerous groups, which they claimed, and they did shut down some dangerous groups, but they also shut down a lot of other groups that had no danger to them. VCDL, for God's sakes, was shut down by Facebook. And VCDL is the Virginia Local Gun Rights Group, which is a registered lobbying organization that's never called for violence. They're not like a militia or anything else like that. They're like GOA on the state level. And there were other state level gun rights groups that were shut down. And one of the things that I thought was really disturbing is when they were like, we're monitoring VCDL lobby day to see who was there. And I was like, well, I was there. And like, I know other people from Facebook were there. We're not a danger, guys.
Right. So in
And
this case, you had a corporation, a private entity, monitoring who was attending a.
Yeah, they were looking for groups that were attending the VCDL rally lobby day. And they talked about how, you know, tens of thousands of gun owners standing up for the Second Amendment was a scary thing when it wasn't. I mean, it's like if you went there was no violence. There was one arrest, and it was an arrest that had something to do with somebody that wasn't even part of the rally, and it was a mask violation, which back then you couldn't wear a mask.
Right.
Now it's like totally different.
Right. Now it's completely normal.
Yeah.
So for you eventually got kicked off of Facebook, right? Your personal account, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, I got kicked off. My personal account got banned. What happened with that is one of my good friends, Rachel Malone, wrote an article that ran in the Houston Current about Kamala Harris and her stating that the Second Amendment was not an individual right. The AFP, which is the French government funded equivalent of the AP, is a trusted Facebook fact checker, and they marked that as false. So I was like, wait, I thought we were supposed to stop governments from interfering in our elections. And plus, that's not false. That's true. She filed an amicus brief in the Heller case saying that the individual does not have a right to bear arms. So what I did is I posted just her amicus brief, a link to the amicus brief off the court's website. And that got marked as false too. It's like, so you're saying that
the amicus brief from the Heller case that you just posted a link to was marked
with no
as
context.
False. With no context.
Yeah, with no context whatsoever.
That was marked as false.
So I contacted Facebook of like, look, I need a comment. I'm going to write about foreign election interference by the French this time, and here's the proof. I sent them all the proof. I was like, would you like to comment? They said no comment. They removed all the false stuff on there. All the false flags was all removed overnight, and then they banned me for being a dangerous person.
And then you reach out to them again to find out why you got booted, correct?
Yeah, I've reached out. The only reason why I know of a dangerous person is that because what they were told internally, because I had some friends open an internal ticket. It was like, why the hell did you ban him? We don't agree with him on most things, but there's no reason to ban him. And like, oh, he's a dangerous person. And they're like, why? And they're like, he just is. And then I reached out to them. I was like, why was I banned? And they're like, well, you know what? We're not telling you. You don't have a right to know.
Huh.
You are no longer eligible to use our platform.
And this led to you and GOA filing an FEC complaint against Facebook, correct?
Yeah, we filed an FEC complaint against Facebook because in my duties as a journalist, I asked them a legitimate question about a French-funded organization, a French government-funded organization, incorrectly fact-checking a Kamala Harris thing. And then when you clicked on it, made it so you couldn't click on it. It put an overlay, so when you clicked on it, it took you to a page that said it was fake and all this other stuff, without actually addressing the fact that it wasn't fake. And not only wasn't it fake, that in her own words that she wrote, that an individual does not have the right to keep and bear arms.
So that was in September, October, if I'm not mistaken, of 2020, correct?
Correct.
At this point, like, what happens with an FEC complaint? Do you ever hear back from the FEC? Do they tell you anything? Or
it was under investigation. They served Facebook and everything, and everything was going smoothly until after the inauguration, and then after the inauguration, The investigation was halted by the Biden administration.
So it just sits in limbo now? Like, how does...
Yeah, it's halted. It sits in limbo forever.
So I'm assuming at this point you're not expecting to hear anything ever again.
No. I mean, there are some legal steps that we can take to force them to continue the investigation, and we are still discussing whether we are going to do that or not.
Okay.
But there are still some legal steps, but because the investigation is not closed, it's just on hold.
Right.
Like permanently.
But there's no like timeline, there's no shot clock, if you will. Like, for example, I work at a telecommunications company. When I get a ticket, I have an SLA. I've got a service level agreement that I have to respond to in X amount of time, blah, 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 blah. In this case, with the government, that doesn't necessarily exist unless you take it upon yourself, or GOA and you take it upon yourselves to pay more legal fees to then press the appropriate buttons to get something moving.
Yeah.
Am I summarizing that correctly? Kind of?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And just because it's moving doesn't mean it's going to move fast.
Gotcha. So do you expect to hear anything? I mean, aside from taking whatever additional steps you may take, outside of that, do you expect to hear anything back ultimately from that complaint?
Probably not at this point. The FEC has really changed people in the past few months. So I'm not really expecting them to take it too seriously, at least to the level that they were taking it at. There was a lot of movement on it and everything else. But at this point, I don't expect them to like move on it. If anything, maybe it's a shot across the bow of like Facebook of saying, "Hey, don't do this." And one thing that I really do like, Rob Olson is the guy who drafted it, and he's a great attorney. His draft of our complaint have been used by a bunch of other companies, including Parler and stuff like that, and some other organizations to make other FEC complaints against other tech giants. So something might have came out of it. It was the first one that went that direction, and it was not the last one.
So hopefully that draft makes it ultimately cheaper for people to retain lawyers and be able to file a similar complaint. Since it's a draft, you just kind of fill in the blanks, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's cut and paste at that point.
Yeah.
And I know the Olsons, they are true believers. So they're pretty much on board with letting anyone use it as a draft who wants, basically, from what I understand.
At this point, given your experience at Facebook and now being an investigative journalist, social media as a whole, and obviously big tech is a whole behemoth of a problem on its own, but specifically for a journalist like yourself, what problems does it present to you being able to get to, as you stated earlier in our interview here, the truth ultimately?
Okay, well, it's a double-edged sword.
Sure.
I was a journalist when I was on Facebook. I was doing it part-time before I started doing it more of a full-time thing. Social media, they try to silence you, but social media does also allow you to reach people that you probably wouldn't reach, or whatever. There was some stories where I hit roadblocks and I couldn't find the sources I needed, or couldn't find the documents I needed. So I put out a call, like a bat symbol,
Sure.
saying, "Hey, if you have this, let me know." And I started getting more information, and I developed contacts that way. So it's actually helped me build contacts, helped me build inside sources to verify stuff. Usually it's stuff that I just need verified. Like, hey, I'm looking for this document. If you have it, send it to me. And I make sure it comes from a second source, so not a third source.
Sure.
Because you never want to go on one source. You always want to have multiple sources. So sometimes you sit on a big article and it's like, man, if I can just get one more source.
Gotcha. So I don't know nearly as much about like the journalist side. So I assume that there is a preferred method, like you just said, right? Having multiple sources to validate a specific claim. But for as much as that social media presence has brought it together and made it easier for you to reach out to people, which is exactly what I did, right? When I found you on YouTube and I was like, let me reach out and see if he's willing to talk. There are negatives to it, and it feels like in your specific place, it has more to do with this blanket fact checking as opposed to anything else that might be removing people from the ability to make their own ultimate decisions. Do you feel like that's somewhat accurate, or?
Yeah, I do. And it's not so much the fact checking. If fact checking was just fact checking, that would be great. Let's check. Like 2 + 2 = 4. All right, that's fine. Let's fact check that. You know, I've seen it where things were marked false because someone said something and the fact check was like, oh, they said that, but they actually meant this. And then you go back and you watch it and you're like, they didn't mean that.
Do you feel like it's headline grabby? Because I feel like in this situation with the article, because the article was, let me see here, false information flagging. No, that's not the name of the article. Where's the name of the article? Oh, here it is. Kamala Harris says she supports your Second Amendment rights. Her record proves otherwise. I mean, that title feels like if you were to just read that title, Facebook would be able to try to flag that as false and kind of get away with it. But a title in media space, I feel like, is supposed to pique your interest, make you question something so that you then read the article, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't even write my own headlines because they're not grabby enough. I'm not good at writing headlines.
But that's the point of a headline, is to pique your interest so that you read the article, right? So if you're writing titles that could skew based on how quick you read it.
Well, that headline is factually accurate. She did say, I support your Second Amendment rights. But then when you actually look at what she has done, she doesn't.
Right. Okay. So her record proves otherwise. I guess in this specific context, it would be, hey, you're challenging a specific candidate in a way that we don't enjoy. Like, is that what you're getting out of this?
Yeah, it is. Like, when I posted the amicus brief, the Kamala Harris amicus brief, I didn't post a headline or anything.
It was just a link to the amicus brief.
Just a link to the amicus brief.
Was that a .gov?
That was a .gov, yeah.
Okay.
So there's no comments, and that was on the suggestion of Rob Olson, who's my attorney. I was like, I think that they're doing this on purpose. He's like, why don't you just post the amicus brief, the direct link to the official amicus brief, and not post any comments or anything on it and see what happens? And I did, and I was blown away. I also think
yeah, go ahead.
No, I also reached out to some back channels to have an internal ticket opened up to say, hey, this is being marked as false, and it's not. So I think by me making noise backstage, that might have also got me targeted as well.
Interesting.
And plus, maybe because I used to be I used to work at Facebook. Maybe that's why they targeted it. They're very vindictive people.
Well, I'm interested to see ultimately how it ends up, whether or not you ever hear anything back from the FEC, and if you do hear back, if it's just a, hey man, we looked, we didn't find anything, see you later, or if they actually come up with a little more.
Well, we have pages and pages and pages of evidence, and it's not just me. There's other people listed in there. I was like the lead plaintiff on the complaint, but there was other people that did the same thing. That after I did, they went back and they did the same thing, and they got banned as well. And the funny thing is, I have a friend named Roger, and Roger, as a joke, put on his employment thing because he's retired military, medically retired military. You know, as a joke, he wrote, "I work for John Crump," which it was an inside joke. I was telling him, I was like, "Yeah, you need to come work for me," just like joking, you know.
Sure.
I was like, you know, you need to come work for me. I need my house painted and stuff. You know, it's something stupid. You know, my friend. So he put that on, and he got banned, which was kind of funny.
Is he part of the complaint filed, or did he not get involved in it at that point?
No, I mean, he's not involved in it because he's just a average guy who just like lives.
Sure.
But he doesn't post anything controversial, and the only reason that we think that he could get possibly have gotten banned was because he wrote he worked for me and he linked to my profile, linked to my profile in his statement. So they banned his account, and he was like, "What the hell?"
That's interesting. Huh. Well, let me change and shift gears here a little bit over to what you do today. Me personally, I'm more interested in your investigative journalism and the things that you've done. I know before we started recording, you had told me you have literally hundreds of interviews with all sorts of different people. I've been able to read and look at a couple of them. I know you've interviewed Caitlin Bennett, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Merrill Rutledge, Derek LeBlanc. I mean, you've got a litany of people that you've interviewed. Is there a favorite interview or a favorite person you've gotten to talk to that you're just like, that was so awesome?
I mean, all of them bring something to the table, which is incredible. And I've interviewed a lot of different people. I've even interviewed like the Oak Ridge Boys and the Misfits. You know,
yeah,
I'm a big Misfits
outside
fan.
of the political and into music, even.
Yeah. So it's all really cool interviews and stuff like that. A couple people that I enjoyed interviewing a lot was Rhonda Ezell. She was the lead plaintiff in Ezell versus the city of Chicago, which is probably one of the top 3 most important Second Amendment cases ever. And the reason why I like that interview so much is because Rhonda and we just hit it off. We became fast friends. And there's another guy named Tony Simon who runs a company called Simon Says Shooting, and he has something called Diversity Shoot, which is 2A for everyone.
Okay.
He runs it out of New Jersey, and I interviewed him, and it was a video interview. I've interviewed him several times. The first time I interviewed him, it was supposed to be like an hour interview, and 4 hours into it, I was like, I gotta go to bed. and the reason why I liked it is because it went everywhere. It started out with him talking about a video of a Karen, and like 2 hours later, it ended with, and that's how you get socialism.
Right.
So I mean, he's one of my favorite people to interview.
How about favorite article? Because like I said, I liked the one you wrote on Adam Langford's study of mass shootings called into question. Is there one specific for you that when you were done writing it, you were like, man, this is perfect?
Let me think about that's a really hard decision. I've written over 1,000 articles.
Yeah, absolutely, hundreds upon
probably close
hundreds.
to 2,000 articles. There was, let me think, favorite article that I wrote. It's gonna sound silly, but I wrote an article about a event called Red October out in Las Vegas. And it wasn't like a serious article or anything like that, where it wasn't like an ATF leak or anything like that. And it was an article that got like tons and tons of traction. But the reason why I liked it is because it got to show the gun world not taking itself too seriously. Red October is an event that's held outside Vegas, and I can only describe it as Comic-Con meets machine guns. People go out there and they dress up in costumes, and they shoot machine guns all weekend. And I liked it because it showed, that we can be Second Amendment advocates and we can be Second Amendment people, but we also don't have to take ourselves seriously 100% of the time.
Is that the event where you've got people that bring all sorts of like different caliber guns, more rare guns, more interesting guns as well, just as a free for all?
Yes. I actually got to shoot an MP40, which is my favorite gun of all time.
I think I
Or
saw
MP44,
that in like
sorry.
a Tom Clancy video game.
Yeah, MP44. Sorry, not MP40.
Okay.
MP44. It's like one of my favorite guns of all time. And I've never had the chance to fire one. Like a converted semi-automatic, never had the chance to fire anything. And the ammunition is really hard to find and it's really expensive. Well, the owner of Rifle Dynamics happened to have a fully authentic, which I'm a gun collector, so fully parts matching, number matching firearms is like holy grail, especially like MP44. And I got to fire over and over again. I've probably put like 500 rounds through the firearm. It's like my dream gun, one of my dream guns.
So just another chance to showcase the fact that even though the 2A community is very serious about the Second Amendment, that doesn't mean they're like that 24/7. They can kick back, have fun, do what they do on a regular basis. Is that really the gist of why you liked that article? Nice.
Yeah, I like that article, and one that I liked, but it's more of a smartass reason.
Sure.
Is when the Regina Lombardo, who used to be the acting head of the ATF and the assistant acting head of the ATF, which is now the acting head of the ATF, Marvin Richardson, met with the Biden administration, the incoming Biden administration, the transition team, like 2 days after the election. And I was able to get an article and get a picture of them meeting, like Regina Lombardo and Marvin Richardson. I got a picture from the meeting, and I got to get it out before they got out of the meeting. Gotcha. So when they walked out of the meeting, it's like, hey, they met. This is what they were talking about. So I reported it in real time.
Before they did any sort of a press release or announcement or anything.
Oh, they weren't going to do a press release or an announcement.
Oh, okay.
It was just a total backroom thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And I got it out before they even left the room.
Nice. As a journalist, that has to be, yeah. I could see why that would be a cool one on towards the top of your list.
And I have a picture from the meeting.
How did you get that? Just somebody inside?
Someone inside the meeting. Nice. They don't know who it is.
Nor do they need to know.
Nor do they need to know.
Well, let me go into guns a little bit here, if you don't mind, and talk about DRM, digital rights, and why is it that people who are gun owners are really hesitant or really, in some ways, resistant even to start adding technology to their weapons. I mean, it's 2021. Pretty much technology has touched everything in our lives, except for, it feels like, guns. Short of maybe safes. That's about it. And even then, the technology with safes is pretty... I mean, it's not crazy.
Okay, I can answer that pretty easily.
Okay.
And give you an example of why. There is a coin called SafeCoin.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is something that this company wants gun owners to use, and they are seeing that the banks are probably going to shut us down. So the SafeCoin would be tied to a firearm. So basically, by using a SafeCoin, it would automatically do background checks every day, and it would also be tied to the serial number, so you couldn't transfer the firearm without transferring the SafeCoin. and that's a registry. And gun owners are very against registries because we know exactly what happens with the registries. They lead to confiscations usually. And we have seen that with people getting letters in the mail and stuff like that whenever something gets banned somewhere. So that's one of the reasons. Digital rights management on 3D printed files is something that also scares gun owners because, one thing, when you 3D print a gun, the big power of 3D printing is, it defeats gun control because I can print something without the government knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying that the government shouldn't know. It's saying that the government does not have a right to know. And I don't think they have the right to know. And when I 3D print a firearm, I print it in a way where they don't know, because Second Amendment, right? Right to bear arms. With DRM, they can actually change that. So when you download a file, that it can actually be used as a registry of like who has it. It can log IPs. It can do all sorts of things to it as well. And if we look at basically DRM, that basically shut down like all file sharing sites back in the day for music. And we don't want to see that happen with firearms. We don't want to see a big manufacturer put DRM on a file and have the ability to stop people from transferring that firearm file to other people. And there's a lot of different reasons, but those are just some of the high level reasons.
So you've got the database, which obviously you guys are not for. I would imagine part of it too, if you have the ability as a manufacturer to stop a firearm or lock it up, for lack of a better term, that's not something I would imagine the community would be interested in either, right? If I have to connect my weapon to the internet in order to get some like certification or something like that to unlock the trigger guard so that I can go to the range, like that's not feasible either, right?
Well, that's not unfeasible. And there's other things that people are like, well, why are you against biometrics on a firearm to be able to fire it? And I can ask the same people, do you have anything biometric? And they're like, yeah, I do. My phone. Like, has your phone ever rejected your fingerprint because your fingers are too wet or you're too sweaty? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, now imagine somebody coming to kill you and your fingers are too sweaty and you pick up your firearm. You want something that's going to work every single time and not 80% of the time or 90% of the time.
Sure.
You want to increase your chances of being able to successfully defend yourself as much as possible. I'm not willing to give up, 10% chance of somebody being able to kill me. And you got to realize where I come from with firearms. A lot of people don't know why I am so pro 2A or pro Second Amendment or pro gun rights, because, Second Amendment basically acknowledges the rights that we already have. And the reason why I am pro 2A goes back to when I was a year old. I was a year old and we lived on a farm in Fairfax, which is kind of funny now because Fairfax is this sprawling metropolis that connects right to DC. But I lived in a farm in Fairfax. My father was not in the picture, so it was just my mom, me, and my 4 older sisters. And I was about a year old at the time. And my mom heard something at the front door. So she went to the front door. She looked out because she thought she heard somebody jiggling the door. She looked out. She didn't see anyone. So she was like, all right, started going back into where she was coming from. And she heard a window downstairs break in the basement. We have a door going that went out to the backyard from the basement. So she's like, okay, now there's someone trying to come in. So she went and got her .38 Subnova revolver, which at the time was known as Saturday Night Specials,
Yeah.
and she went downstairs. And what she saw downstairs was a masked guy with a knife. So he was in the house. And my mom had me, a 1-year-old, and my 4 older sisters upstairs. And she told him, "Hey, you get out now, or I'm going to shoot you." And he's like, "You're not going to shoot me." My mom's like, "If you take one more step, I will shoot you." And he's like, "No, you won't." And he took that step, and my mom unfortunately had to shoot. Um, but without that firearm, I don't know if I would be here right now. I don't know if my mom would be here or my sisters would be here or what's going to happen. He knew that there was people in the house. He knew that there were only women in the house, and he was definitely wasn't up to no good. He had a weapon, and I don't think he was there to rob the place. Especially when he was like not trying to be quiet or anything else, sneak around and grab stuff. So without that firearm, I don't know what would have happened, but I'm pretty sure it would not have been good.
Hmm. That's a pretty wild story, man. I'm
Yeah.
glad that that your mom and your sisters and yourself were, saved for many potential danger. Man, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's. Do you feel like a lot of people have not stories similar to that per se, but thoughts or ideas as to be able to protect themselves in a situation like that comes up, and they want to feel comfortable being able to do that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've talked to people all the time that have similar stories or other stories. Uh, I have a guy that I know. He runs MJ Firearms Training. He was outside of Chicago, where he's from, and he has a concealed carry permit for Illinois. And a couple members of the Latin Kings, which is a street gang, started firing shots off at him and started chasing him. And the whole reason why they were firing shots at him and chasing him because they thought he was someone he wasn't. It was a mistaken identity. So those guys never done anything to these guys. Have no idea what he's not a gangster or anything like that. It was just a case of mistaken identities. But he was able to use his firearm to fire back, and I think you can say he had a lot more training than they did because he was a lot more successful with his shot placements. And so he saved his life because they were literally firing their guns at him. And if he didn't have a gun, and let's say he was just walking around because he was like, "Oh, nothing's going to happen to me because I don't do anything wrong and I stay away from the wrong crowds and I stay away from the wrong places." And these two guys were just driving by and they mistook him for someone else.
Yeah. Again, that's wild.
But I hear stories like that a lot, especially being probably more than the usual person hears because the field I work in.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's probably people that want to tell you their story all the time. Given your time with Ammo Land and obviously being the director of the GOA in Virginia, there, I'm sure you hear that more often than most. But
Yeah, there was a 13-year-old out in Las Vegas that defended him and his 9-year-old sister from a child molester that was just got out of prison that broke into their house. He grabbed his dad's AK and was able to defend him and his sister. I mean, it's gonna scar that kid for life, but he's alive.
sure,
And then the pregnant woman in Florida that happened about a few months ago, where a couple of people broke into her house and she had an AR and was able to fight back.
what do
And
you?
I
Yeah,
have a
go ahead,
friend
Joe.
I have a friend named Stephen Williford. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I can't say I am.
Uh, there was a guy that shot up a church down in Sandy Springs, Texas, and the guy who grabbed his AR and he only had 7 rounds in it and ran out and was able to take down the shooter with his AR barefoot. The guy uh, he he shot the guy. The guy got in his car, and he jumped in another guy's car, and they were able to chase him down. And the guy was wounded, so the guy ended up taking his own life. But he had plans to. Apparently, he wrote that he was going to go shoot up another church, and Stephen Williford stopped him.
And I certainly don't want to take away any of these people's experiences and their abilities to be able to protect themselves, obviously, in these situations. But what do you say to people who will point to, negligent discharges by kids in a home or school shootings or those situations? What do you say to people like that who might use those as a case to say, hey, we need to do something about these guns?
Okay, a couple of different things.
Sure.
Gun, and you can verify this. If crime research actually is a pretty good research for this, but crime research actually has this. A gun is 4 times more likely to be used in self defense than in any type of negligent discharge or in a crime. So there is that. So you're actually creating more of safety issue by banning firearms. And there are things that people can do that would, prevent kids from getting guns and whatnot. Education is a big thing. My kids are educated on firearms. My firearms are also in a way in a place where they can't get to them. I'm not saying that the government should mandate that at all, because I don't think the government has any business mandating it. But there are ways to mitigate ND with kids or anything else like that. Getting back to the school shooting thing, school shootings are exceedingly rare. And when there is one school shooting, a lot of times there's one shortly after that. I think we have an issue with actually making these shooters into quasi celebrities.
Mm.
That's one of the reasons why I don't use their names. There's actually a study, and I can send you the study, that says that 80% of shooters that they've talked to, when asked why they did it, one of the reasons they always give is to be known.
Yeah, notoriety. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, including the Aurora theater shooting, I believe. Him, Dylan Roof is another. I said his name. I should don't usually want to say their names, but the church shooter down in Atlanta, they want their names to be out there and known. And even though I just slipped up there, I try not to ever say their names, and we don't run pictures of them, of the guy out in Las Vegas or anything. We don't do that. I won't do that, at least in my articles.
So do you
And
feel like, as a whole, well, maybe not as a whole, right? Eh, From our media, right? We are in some ways unintentionally glorifying or giving them the podium that they were looking for,
we
which
are
is why they
definitely
committed the atrocities that they've done.
we are definitely incentivizing them. And I talked to someone that, off the record, so I'm not going to say where, but they
Sure.
are on a major cable news network, and I talked to them exactly about what I'm talking about right now. I was like, it's out there. I mean, the studies are out there showing a lot of the reasons why these mass murderers are doing their crimes is because they want to be known. It was like, why does your organization put out their names? And what I was told was, well, other people are going to do it, and people are going to want to know what their names are. So they're going to go to either them or they're going to go to us. So we're going to put their names out there because we want people to come to us for the most information possible. And if they're going to go somewhere else because we're not printing their names, it's worth it for us.
So by that logic, wouldn't it be more beneficial for a group like the GOA or any other guns rights group to work to lobby to have it, be illegal to print or publish the names of people who commit acts like that?
Absolutely not, because that is something that I don't do, and I won't do. But at the same time, it shouldn't be illegal for them to print the name. Um, I think that will get into a First Amendment issue right there. They have every right to print the name. Well, maybe they shouldn't print the name. I mean, I make a personal choice not to,
Right.
but they have the right to. I mean, that's their decision whether to print the name or not. That's something that they have to decide.
But I feel like when it comes to individual choice, and tell me if I'm wrong, John, but you on a personal level, on an individual level, as a journalist, make the conscious choice not to do that. Whereas if you get into a large behemoth media company, there are these, faceless figureheads that care more about the profit margin than they do about the integrity of reporting. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where that's coming from, right?
Yeah, it is. That's one of the reasons why I won't go work for a large media organization. I mean, I've had opportunities to go work for like really big media organizations, and I've always said no for more money.
Mm-hmm.
But I, I feel that it's I want to be able to have more control. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror in the morning.
So you feel like you would lose some journalistic integrity on your own part by having to go and work for a company that's going to tell you what you're going to write and how you're going to write it?
Well, that, and even if you don't write it the way that they want you to write it, they will always go back and change it to
Gotcha.
make it the way they wanted to write it.
All right. Well, final word, if I may. Is there a solution to, shootings like that? Is there a way to go about having your cake and eating it too?
You got to look at you don't want to look at you don't want to look at the tools being used. You want to look at the actual calls.
Okay.
And there's some organizations out there that are doing a great job of doing that. Walk the Talk America is one that I can think of right off the top of my head. And Joe Rogan once said, "We have a mental health problem disguised as a gun problem."
Yeah.
And I think we need to get to the area. I'm against. I'm against socialized medicine in most cases, but with mental health, I do believe a lot of those people aren't capable of taking care of themselves. So I do think we need some better mental health system in the country.
And you think that'll impact or lessen the amount of, and I know you said it's extremely rare, but unfortunately it still hits the news and
Yeah,
everyone gets worried about it, right? It's
yeah.
kind of like kids being kidnapped in the 90s,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah, the kids being kidnapped in the
It
90s,
was pretty
or
rare, but it was made such a big deal that everybody thought their kid was going to get snatched off the front porch.
yeah, well, you can put it this way, right? You have a better chance of being killed by a bed sheet than and being killed in a school shooting. And
I'm going to
I
have to look that one up.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy. 900 people a year get killed by accidentally getting wrapped up in
No
bed sheets.
way. You're
Yeah,
joking.
it's crazy, right? No,
No way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Look it up. It's like it's really crazy. And also, you gotta also break it down to per capita. Maybe it's 800. It's something like that.
Dude, you've got to be kidding me.
You looked it up?
I'm pulling it up right now,
Yeah.
and according to, well, I don't know if this is a legitimate site, so I should probably not.
Yeah, but I actually looked it up like the Consumer Safety Board.
Yeah, that's up from 327 in the year 2000.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like there's an epidemic of bedsheet deaths.
Okay.
Who knows?
So that's a
But
new
also,
one. I've not heard a comparison to that.
Yeah. Also, you have to look at per capita too. Per capita, the United States isn't even in the top 10.
In what, school shootings?
Yeah, in mass shootings.
Oh, mass shootings. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think anyone really breaks it down into school. Be interesting
Okay.
to actually break it down. But yeah, if you look it up per capita mass shootings per year, yeah,
Trying to pull it up right now, just offhand, but it looks like, according to the Crime Prevention Research Center, which I believe you cited in the article with Adam Lankford, Norway is at 1.888
mhm.
per capita, and the United States is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th at 0.089.
Yeah, I believe it
That's
was
lower
11.
than Serbia, France, Macedonia, Albania, Slovakia, Switzerland, Finland, Belgium, and the Czech Republic.
Yeah, people don't hear that though, right?
I mean, I didn't know that until now, but I guess, you compare it against per capita. Obviously, a smaller country, one mass shooting might make that, or a
Yeah, I
couple
mean
of
it's
mass
it's
shootings. You
yeah.
get into this weird number game, though, John, right? Is that a
Yeah, it
fair
is.
statement? Like, when people
Yeah,
go to
it is.
statistics, they look at a statistic, and I feel like a lot of people can extrapolate a lot from just a statistic.
Yeah, it exactly it is, and that's exactly why I bring it up, because one side's going to bring up per capita, the other side's going to bring over overall.
Yeah. Well, I hope that one of your next articles soon you try to do some research on how many people get killed by bed sheets per capita throughout the world.
Yeah, I actually started that a little bit, but I don't know who would run it.
Well, that's fair. I shouldn't joke about it, but yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate your time, John. For anybody listening, if you've gotten this far, I'm going to put it at the beginning, but ammoland.com, it's crump.com, right? Or is it crumpy.com?
Crumpy.com.
Crumpy with a Y, crumpy.com. Check him out on YouTube, John Crump News, and check him out, John Crump Live. I mean, he live streams pretty much like 5-6 times a week. There's a lot of great content out there. Please check out John. And once again, thank you, man, for all your time.
Thank you.